you. Great.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Turner. We are here tonight at McNally Robinson Booksellers on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis, and I am joined by our guest conductor this week, Maria Fuller. Hello, Maria.
Hello, Mark.
So, I have to tell the audience, I've known Maria for a long time now. I'm not actually sure when we would have first met, but like upwards of 15 years.
I would say at least that, yeah, music festival.
You were a kid. And I remember you, so I remember.
I still feel like a kid.
That's good. That's fair. I remember you because I was just finishing competing at provincials when you were like starting in senior piano, and it was like you and Sam Deason and like all these like children who could play circles around me, and I was like, that's not fair. So I've known you for a very long time, so it's a thrill to have you with us this week.
Thank you.
We had you here at the SSO earlier this winter, and you're back for this concert, which is perfect.
Mid-January. Where's time gone?
I know you were here in the truly in the dead of winter. But you grew up in Saskatchewan, so
I was kind of welcoming that. And now it's so warm, there are bugs out, and I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah. So let's talk about you for a minute. You are you grew up in Earl Grey, near Earl Grey, because you were on a farm.
Yes, I'm from a 2,000-acre grain farm northeast of Earl Grey, 8 miles.
Do you know the exact land location?
I do, but might not mention it at the moment.
It's fair. That's fair. I grew up on a farm as well, and I still to this day, don't know the land location, even though we still own the land, but I've never been able to memorize it.
Well, funny story, when Abby was driving back from Rochester, one of my sisters who's going to Eastman School of Music, she just drove back last week over the border, and they gave her significant trouble because they didn't understand the address of a farm. She was rattling off like 2020 north of blah 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 blah. Ma'am, just give us an address. Where will you be staying? So she gave it again, and they said, we still don't know what you're saying. So she gave them our grandmother's address in Strasbourg. And they were fine.
And they were fine with that, even though that was not where she was going.
No, not at all.
No, I've experienced that with travel as well. So you grew up in Earl Grey, and you come from a family of musicians.
Yes.
Quite literally. Yep. On top of being our conductor this week, Maria is an accomplished pianist, an accomplished trumpeter, one of the best collaborative pianists, an opera repetiteur. You do all these things. You also compose.
Yeah.
And I really don't know how you have time to do anything in a spare time. But
I don't.
You grew up in the Fuller Brass.
Yes. So I'm from a family of 5 kids. As you know us all very well. Homeschooled all 5 of us on this farm. And so pandemics are kind of normal for us because you don't really see people. You go grocery shopping once every 2 weeks anyway. So there's that. I know pandemics suck. It's not really going well, and I hope we can get out of this soon. But anyway, we were all musically minded, I guess. We all did piano and trumpet, and we studied in Regina. And I have to say a big thank you to my parents who are watching this, who spent 12-hour days 4 times a week just sitting and doing we would pack 2 different meals and off we would go to the city, and people were crying and shouting and falling out of windows because some of them were very young, not naming names, but we made it through by the grace of God.
And lovely parents. I've met your parents. It's always wonderful. They're a perennial figure at all of your performances. So it's wonderful to see them. So hello to them.
Thank you.
So you grew up playing both piano and trumpet.
Correct. Yep.
Almost every member of your siblings play trumpet.
That's right. We all do piano and trumpet.
Yeah.
We played through our teeth missing, actually. So we started both instruments at age 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Weird for a brass player, actually.
Weird for a brass player.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very standard for a pianist to start young.
Yes,
but
exactly.
brass players usually don't start till they're 12, 13.
Yeah, like grade 7 band, grade 9 band, or whatever that is. We were very fortunate to have been brought up through the Regina Lions band with conductor Robert Mossing, who was... We were homeschooled, so we say we were raised on the farm but brought up in the city. And one of the people that did that for us was Robert Mossing, who taught us an incredibly high standard of excellence and unity and team playing. I could read music before I could read the names of the pieces. So you can imagine just how much he was able to teach and form the minds of the people he taught. So
yeah, a incredible influence on so many musicians out of Regina.
Seriously.
And then, as I said, you grew up and you started kicking all of our butts at provincials, which was normal in the brass room because your older sister Natalie had done that ahead of you.
Yes.
So that was good. And then your younger sister Abby did that after you, so that was also good.
Yep.
And then when you went off to study, you went to McGill first. Did you go
Correct.
to McGill first?
I did my first year at U of A actually with Jacques Dupre.
Right.
And then I actually transferred into the last 3 years at McGill. Yep.
Yeah. And what was it like to go from Earl Grey to Montreal?
Funny.
Very different. So many more bagels.
Yeah, and I can't remember the name of them, but there's 2 different bagel stores I remember. They were both competing all the time. I was like, they're both great. Yeah, they're a little bit different. Earl Grey, village of 250 people, and Montreal, I don't even know the population of Montreal, probably 1 million. I was just talking to someone about this last week, actually. I was asked this question, how have you done so well, or how have you done maybe at all, moving from the farm and being homeschooled to being surrounded by people all day long? I remember when I was 19, sitting on my steps in NDG in Montreal and witnessing the end of my yard being 3 meters away and a street starting, and just the boxed-in feeling that I was feeling in that moment. And I determined that if I was to be sliced in half, I would bleed green for Rough Riders and John Deere tractors and the prairie fields and the color of Saskatchewan. But I would also have this infinite space within me that I really feel has formed me a lot. And I was realizing that people in the city don't have the same concept of space and watching your dog run away for 4 days, or as I learned from somebody on the Thunder Bay airplane last week, they think they run away for a week. I think if the dog was big enough, you'd probably be able to see it run away for a week. But it really has formed me growing up in the country. But it's also given me a lot of patience for living in the city too. And I'm grateful for how well I've done because I recognize the discrepancy. But I think what it was is I was just so focused on music and learning and getting the most out of those environments that it worked out well for me anyway.
And it's interesting, actually, there are a lot of exceptional musicians from Canada who grew up on farms.
Exactly.
A few years ago, probably, I say a few years ago, now it's like, it was probably 10 years ago. I remember sitting downtown here in Saskatoon at the Samurai, which is sadly now gone, with Jennifer Snow, who at the time was the head of the Royal Conservatory.
That's Jens Lindemann's
Jens Lindemann's wife,
Yeah.
yes. With Marc Durand, who is one of the great piano teachers in Canadian history, and with Kent McWilliams, who teaches at St. Olaf, but is from Moose Jaw, well, from outside Moose Jaw. And the 4 of us were all sitting there. It had been a day of piano workshops, and we got talking about the fact that all 4 of us grew up on a farm beside or near a town of less than 200 people. And it was so we actually got talking about that, and we started listing off all the people we knew who grew up, who were, accomplished musicians who grew up on small farms. And Jennifer and I talked about the fact that when you're on a farm, you don't have a whole lot else to do. Like, it's not like you can call up your friend and be like, I'll be right over, because your friend is like 5 miles away.
Yeah, exactly.
And or more, like. And we were a half hour from town, so it's not like I could just pop over to friends in town and see them. So you end up walking through the countryside, which we'll get to in this concert, but and practicing your instruments.
Exactly. You have so much time to reflect and to think about what it is that you want out of life and out of these things that your parents are paying all this money to teach you how to do. Yeah, I was grateful for, and we'll get into this, as you said, later, but I'm actually working on a country song right now called Down the Old Back Road, which I hope Brad Paisley will sing, or someone else, whoever I can get, maybe not, classical conductor running a country song. I don't know how that'll go. But just this idea that every time I come home from the city, the first thing I have to do is walk down the back road. I feel like it clears my mind, and it heals me, because, like, first of all, when you go on a walk in the city, you feel like everybody's watching you. And it's not just a feeling. They are.
Well, yeah, exactly.
They are watching.
Or they're not, and they just don't care, but you still feel that.
Yes.
Yeah, they see you.
Probably that. Yeah. And so when you're on the farm, I just feel like I can start to breathe again and think about what I always used to think about and have true Mark thoughts or true Maria thoughts and to be totally unaffected for that duration of time by the world's influence or what they would have you think about. And so I'm not sure why I got into that, but it's just been such an amazing thing to be able to come back to Saskatchewan all the times that we can to breathe in the air or the bugs. Yeah, it's fun.
It is fun. From Montreal, you went to Cincinnati.
Yes, I did.
Which is an even bigger city.
Yes.
To CCM, one of the great music conservatories in the world today, truly. And I remember hearing you from your time in Montreal to your time in Cincinnati, and how much you grew as an artist exponentially, which was so wonderful to watch as someone who had been a fan of yours since you were a little kid. It was so exciting to see, all pianists mature in their sound, but it was that your musicality was still growing exponentially, which was so wonderful to see. Because sometimes, when you get too academic, you get stuck in that.
It does the opposite thing sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, and yours didn't. And while you were there, you got into opera repetiteur, and that's how you eventually ended up in conducting. Tell us how did you start out thinking you were going to be a conductor?
No. This is how much time do we have? Do we have is this an hour interview?
Well, yeah, 45 to an hour, yeah.
Okay. I don't want to bore anybody, but it's a very interesting story. So I went to Cincinnati to do a master's in piano with Michael Shertock. But interestingly, prior to that, about 7 years, when my older sister Natalie, who you referenced as being a trumpeter, phenomenal trumpeter, and definitely got to learn a lot following her in the family and seeing what she was doing, currently in New York now. When she was going to Luther College, getting her undergraduate in trumpet with Ed Lewis, who we lost to a different place, the president at the time, Bruce Perlson, who was from Cincinnati, told my father, if Maria ever needs a piano teacher, remember us, the chorus master and the pianist and organist of our church teaches. So then I went to McGill and I did all my undergrad stuff. And when it came time to do a master's, Dad said, hey, we should look into this friend who's in Cincinnati, because he was president then, but then moved back. And it turned out to be the piano chair of CCM, this person that he was referencing. So we said our prayers, and I got on the plane and went to Cincinnati. And after that degree, I was approached by Robin Guarino and Marie Franz, who both work at the Met, the New York Met, and they said, hey, we think you're going to have a future with us working at the Met because of this and this and this. Would you consider letting us give you an artist diploma in operatic coaching? I said, well, sure, full scholarship and stipend, F1 visa, get to stay and work. Sure, I'll do that. And
you had done quite a lot of accompanying in Montreal.
Yep, Montreal. Actually, I was so blessed in Montreal, I really thrived in chamber music in accompanying. I found this piano trio. We competed at Fish Off, and after half a year, we were semi-finalists at Fish Off. It's like, what's that? Phil Sly, Canadian-based
You got to do a YouTube performance of the Errol King with Phil Sly, and it's got
it's almost at 1 million views.
Yeah, it is one of the great performances actually of Errol King on YouTube. I truly mean that. It's phenomenal, and if I recall, you filmed it in the middle of the night.
Yes, I filmed that. The funny thing is, I still get these emails from Boston Conservatory, from one of my sisters saying, we watched your Errol King in our history class, because that's the lead that all history classes show, as you know. And so Boston Conservatory, oh, we found you. Can you show us how to play this? Oh, well, that's really interesting. And here's the lesson in that. A lot of times we don't think we're ready to do a recording or to do stuff. Sometimes you just have to do it. And the little nutshell story about this is I was actually recording the Geist Trio, I think by Beethoven, Ravel, with my piano trio as a tape for Fish Off till 3 a.m, so 6 hours. Phil Sly, love him, was my page turner. I could have put him to use as something better than a page turner. I mean, this guy's incredible. He's made quite a career for himself. Yeah. Sat patiently beside me and turned my pages like a champ. Afterwards says, hey, Maria, this guy was like my brother. The mics are set up here. What do you think about trying the Errol King? So my first thought is, okay, haven't played this in 3 months. For those of you who don't know the Errol King, it's triplets, the whole way.
Exceptionally difficult.
In octaves.
Exceptionally difficult.
YouTube at Errol King, Maria Fuller. Yeah. So anyway, sat down. So we did this. We did this first take. Kind of was getting third take. It just sped up and kept getting faster and faster. Okay, A week later, it's on CBC radio, and my landlord's calling me down, Maria, and there is Phil announcing me as this Wunderkind from McGill, and all I can think of is that how I turned E minor into E major at the end. So anyway, Cincinnati.
Yes.
Had some experience with singers. Went to Franz Schubert in Austria, Franz Schubert Institute with Phil, and did stuff there. Did that degree. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how I became a conductor. And that's what has brought me home to Saskatchewan, right here with you today. So after the artist diploma in operatic coaching, approaching the last semester, I said a little prayer. I was like, okay, I've just got 3 degrees in a row. I think I need to have Maria thoughts now to figure out what I've just learned and to think about it. I'll work and make some money here. I'll do my what do you call it? OPT. It's something that you can stay in the States and work for a year, make some money, pay back some stuff. But if that's wrong and I should stay in school, make a way for me to stay in school if my heart's wrong and I should do the DMA in piano and just get it done. So 3 months later, and you know those deadlines are December 1st, So if you want to start in September, you have to apply by December. So I watched December 1st pass by. Now we're in March, and I was preparing to play the Strauss Burlesque Concerto in the CCM Piano Concerto competition, and they had fought hard to keep me out of it because I was no longer a piano major, and Maria's across the street doing opera, but I was taking an elective in piano lessons, so I was kind of doing double duty. I ended up actually winning it and got to be the concerto winner, working with Maestro Gibson, who knew me as an opera player and someone who followed his conducting fairly well, and sight read probably too often. And he contacted me that week with the 3 quotes, which I will take to my grave because they were very shocking. We see that you're a born conductor. You have conductor written all over you. You're going to have a big career in conducting. So I didn't even bother answering that email. I said, I'm coming in to see you about this. And so long story short, they gave me a full scholarship and a stipend and another master's degree to learn how to conduct. Those 2 years were the hardest I have ever worked. By the 11th month, I started to receive audition opportunities as finalist for Vancouver Symphony and Edmonton and Winnipeg and Thunder Bay, and I memorized every program, and I'd have about a week between, so I would be flying back and forth from Cincinnati, and I would be with, colleagues that were watching me literally come up from the ground. Some of them had been conducting for 15 years, but they were seeing this person just going back and forth, and it felt surreal to me, and it felt unfair in some ways because I was learning how to conduct on major podiums in Canada instead of going and already knowing how. And so the whole time I was thinking, man, I can't afford to give anybody a reason to think I'm too young at this. I don't have enough experience, so I would over-prepare everything. Like the Edmonton Symphony audition was interesting. Once I knew what we had to do, they sent us to our dressing rooms and gave us 20 minutes to prepare. And I took my Beethoven score, and I would literally circle things that I wanted to talk about, and I would memorize everything. And just it was crazy. It was such a lot of work. Eventually, I won the Thunder Bay job, where I'm now resident conductor. I have been for 2 years, and it's only been 4 years since that degree. I guess 2 years in a degree, and this is almost my 2nd year out of it. So I'm just very fortunate to be recognized by you and the SSO, and to be able to be here home with you.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. What so I should say I got to know you as a pianist not only at provincials but also at nationals, because you were Saskatchewan's representative in 2013 when that was one of your times as a representative, and I was there as an accompanist for one of the other performers. And then 3 years later we were both accompanists for other performers. What does your background in both piano and trumpet, is that an asset to be able to apply that? I mean, a lot of conductors play one instrument often, or they play all the instruments to a certain degree. Yeah. Very, very few of them necessarily have a great proficiency at 2 different instruments. Does having both sides of the brass brain, and which is a different way to approach music, it really is, and the piano brain, which is a completely different brain than any other instrument in the orchestra. Yeah. What does that bring to your work as a conductor?
It brings a lot, and I guess it's really interesting to have you ask me about that, because it's not something I've thought about too much before, is about that. It definitely It's definitely really helpful because I should mention now that at the age of 12, Alan DeNike, who was the principal bassoonist of the Regina Symphony Orchestra, his wife Janice DeNike taught me piano all those years, and he was my youth orchestra conductor. All of us. So by age 12, I remember my first symphony with him was Dvorak 9. Sat second to my sister Natalie and got her in trouble, of course, because I was a freak. And I remember stands would fall over and I would just be laughing, and Al would be glaring at Natalie, and then I would get reprimanded. So that's when I learned that principals take the brunt for anything that happens in their section. Knowing transposition, knowing what it's like to sit in all of those different seats. I've played with 5 professional orchestras in the States, and here as a pianist and trumpeter, I know, for instance, piano. I know what it's like to sit in the far corner and have an instrument, that's from here to here, complex, and can't hardly see the conductor, but then know that you have to be with him. My heart is with that person as I'm on the podium conducting. I know what it's like to be a trumpet player and know all you want to do is blow the ceiling off, but you never can.
Because there's always a pianissimo.
Yeah,
always.
It just shows up, and then the conductor knows it's
well,
there.
And trumpet is such an exposed part of any orchestra, just out of the nature of the way it creates sound.
Exactly.
And like you say, the piano is often off in the distance, in the pasture, and somehow magically you have to stay in time with everyone across stage.
Right, and anticipate and be kind of ahead, or that you're behind, and the conductor's like, "What are you doing?"
So, do you approach music the same way? You sight read. You're one of the fastest sight readers I've ever known, and you memorize very fast. Do you approach learning a score in the same way you approach learning, say, a piano sonata?
Yes, I would say that I do. The harmony is very important, so I'm understanding all of that. I have perfect pitch, so I was taught to write down everything in the score, but at a certain point, if you know a microwave's a microwave, are you going to go label it? Like if you know that a cactus is a cactus, are you going to say cactus? If you hear that a chord's A major, do you have to write that it's A major? So like a lot of this stuff, I had to realize, okay, so I'm being reprimanded for not writing cactus. It took me a while to process that kind of thing, but the harmonic analysis is very important to me. It kind of is a natural thing. The structure, I think that I, in some ways, pay more attention to things like that here because being a conductor is a huge responsibility. It is an honor, and it is earned, and it is a great respect. I think why I think more about that stuff now than when I was a pianist is because if you are riding a snowmobile alone, you're not accountable for other people's lives, for killing them. If you take a turn and they're on the toboggan, it's kind of like being a soloist. To me, I'm free to do what I want, and I don't have to tell anybody what I'm going to do. And I'll tell you, I miss that a bit.
It's your own risk.
It's my own risk, and a risk I was happy to take.
A lot of soloists talk about it's an easier recitals, more pressure because the repertoire is often more difficult, but it's your own risk. You don't put anyone else at risk.
Exactly. And then you have to get in front of 80 people or 30 to 80 people, all of them highly talented. It's like managing, my teacher told me that being a conductor is like managing high talent. Everybody has not only got, everybody has their own ego. Everybody is brilliant. They don't need you in some sense. Right. So I think one of the biggest assets to being a piano player and a trumpet player, and having studied violin and percussion and all the other things I do, is I know I'm so recent on this side of the podium that my mind is still thinking about what I needed in their seats and how they need to be directed. This might not be a very fun thing to say, but I know a lot of brass players that just want a downbeat. Right. They just want a downbeat.
Because sometimes that's what you need.
They've been counting 80 measures.
Exactly. They just want to make sure that they're 80 measures in.
And if the conductor's not clear, which is a bad word for some conductors, then it makes them screw up. It's them that gets fired. Right. So I have that knowledge, but a lot of conductors they don't like the word clear because it's not artsy, and it doesn't create the sound they want. So I always have this thing in me fighting both sides, and I keep fighting because I know it's going to make me one heck of a conductor eventually if I can remember what they felt like. Right. And for me, that's the key. It's about how to service all of these instruments.
Yeah. You have been doing a great deal of composing as well in the last few years. What got you into composition?
That is a wonderful question. You're like, I know, thank you.
I just made it up, so good. This is good.
It's actually a question I prepared, so I'm very happy about that.
I'm glad someone could, because I did not.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah.
We don't get told what's on this interview, so that's really going much better than I anticipated, so that's really great. My first composition I wrote when I was 8, and it was titled A Walk in the Woods.
How apropos for a trip to the country.
I know.
There you go.
A Walk in the Woods.
Do you still remember it?
Yes.
Wow.
I can play. I wrote it all out.
There you
Actually,
go.
my sister did on Sibelius. How old would she have been? 10?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and my dad said, write a story for it and start your performance in my little dress, saying about this girl. And so I played in the last Mountain Music Festival, and I won a little plaque for it. And then I went immediately home and thought, oh, shoot. Now, this is funny. Mozart would have probably composed 300 things by the age of 8, so I really need to do the next thing. How presumptuous, but I was 8, so it's not. It's just like, why were you thinking? But I was.
Right.
That's
8-year-olds
how
are
I've
like that.
always, and I still think that. I don't compare myself to Mozart anymore, but I still am of this mind that there is so much I have to do. Like right now, there's no time for anything. So I went home and I wrote my second piece in the barn loft on a Saturday night. And I mention this because it's very, how do you say that? Apropos to what we're going to discuss in a minute. Yeah. When I was 20, in Austria for the second time with Philippe at the Franz Schubert Institute, I wrote a piece called Ode to Saskatchewan, a prairie anthem. And now I'm working on a piece out of the north, which I'm going to show you. And all of that to say I've been so greatly influenced by the land, and it seems to be a trend because I keep writing about it. And did you ask me like how do I have the time to compose, or what was the question?
What started you composing? Like what was? Yeah, but you started when you were 8. So
well, I think I should go before that. So I guess when I was like 3 or 4, my parents say that I would hear a commercial and I'd go and I'd play it above my head. So I had this like draw to the instrument that I wasn't told to or didn't think about. So I guess I was developing perfect pitch and then improvising. I'd go to my piano lesson, I guess at 6, and I'd come back and I'd have all my pieces memorized the next week, except with a lot of wrong notes because I didn't care too much what the score said, just enough to get through it. But then I had to be taught that you won't win if you're playing your own notes. So then that was a whole thing to work through. And God bless my teacher, Helen Nixon. But so I guess I was kind of always composing in some weird way. Right.
Do you think growing up on the farm is what gave you that connection to the land?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's a different understanding of I think I'm at this. I think this year is I've now lived in the city as long as I had lived on the farm, which is a weird. Yeah, it's a weird transition weird. To understand. And we no longer have. There's no house at our farm anymore. So we still have the land, but there's nowhere to go stay. And so. Like you said, when you get home, there's that ritual of walking the road. For me, it's the hills. We live in the valley. Anyone who knows where Lacadina, Saskatchewan is knows that it's a long ways to a hill. But there are hills, and they aren't really that far away. But we are literally that flat valley where you can watch your dog go for days. And for me, it's coming over the hills into the valley that. Like it is a ritual. It's a reconnecting to what you always were.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting too that composers from centuries ago felt this same thing that we feel now. It's a very intrinsic, hardcore, deep value that I think all human beings feel is this connection to the outdoors. And I don't mean by that everybody's a camper, because we know that not everybody's a camper.
I am not a camper.
See, I mean, not everybody likes ticks.
We have a cabin at a lake that has a full working bathroom, and there's restaurants nearby. That's roughing it, frankly.
Exactly.
And we have a satellite dish, and I'm trying to get internet. Like that to me is really like backwoods. Yeah.
It's like, where's the internet?
Yeah. Literally, I have driven to the hill to get service. Yeah.
Well, I can imagine a job like you have. You can't really afford to be away from internet that very much. No. So, it's amazing that here I am writing about the land in the 2000s, And I think of our dear Beethoven.
Right.
Here.
I mean that's his Pastoral Symphony was a reconnecting for him. This was a challenging time in his life. He knew he was going deaf. He was the biggest figure in Viennese music at the time. He had his career was bigger than his predecessors like Haydn and Mozart. He was a big figure in that Viennese scene, but he would leave the city to reconnect with nature because he needed to. And it's really fascinating, right? And so, I mean, we saw it also. Brahms would also often go out and stay in the country. It is a reconnecting with something that's not the hustle and bustle of city life. And hilariously, I mean, Vienna in 1805 was not necessarily as hustle and bustle as New York in 2011 or 2021 or maybe during 2020 it was pretty quiet in New York for a bit. But
here too, I
think. They got out of the scene to reconnect. And Beethoven, I mean, that's where this piece goes. It's literally you can journey with him in this trip to the country.
Yeah, exactly. And what I think is an interesting point for me as I study this and as I hear these melodies is to hear what he's written and go, wow. So he was born in 1770, I think, and he died in 1828. 1820. Yeah. That won't always be with you. Thank you, school years. But anyway, the way that he envisioned the countryside based on what he wrote is the way I see it. And it's interesting to see how he picked things out and how 5 movements, each with a title about the brook and the storm, and we're thankful now that the storm's over, or the country people, happy are the country people, and which he has. This is a symphony which he's titled, as you know, and it'll be in the program.
It was programmatic.
Yeah.
That's what's so fascinating. I mean, more or less the first programmatic symphony of any substance.
Well, exactly. And of his 9 symphonies, the only one to be dedicated to the land like that. And it's really interesting for me to see the difference in this. Yeah.
He was such an absolutist. His music had no story, and yet this has a story. It's such an interesting departure from everything before it and an interesting standard for everything after it.
I remember that. I remember when I was studying music history way back in Royal Conservatory, like early teens. I remember stumbling upon that very thought, how programmatic. Yeah. And then all of a sudden he abandoned that and I went, wait, they can't do that. My mind went, either they're this or this, but for some reason he did. And it's just such a testimony to how much the land meant to him.
Yeah, so let's go on that walk. First movement. What is the first movement for you?
First movement for me...
I like that you brought your score. This is the first time a conductor's brought their own score. This is nice.
I thank my teacher, Mark Gibson. That's good. He taught us that the score is our shield and weapon against all arguments, disputes, and any interruptions in rehearsal.
Nice.
Thank you. So, this first word is kind of weird. This is what Beethoven writes. Angenehm heitere Empfindungen, welche bei der Ankunft auf dem Lande im Menschen erwachen.
Gesundheit.
Yeah, means awakening of cheerful feelings on arrival in the countryside.
Yeah, it's literally his first, the moment when he steps out of the carriage. Yeah, you can hear the trees, you can hear the opening in the meadow. You can hear the wind. It's all there.
It's all there. And that to me is the most amazing thing about this. I have all these interviews this week, and everybody says, what about his writing makes it like that? Well, that's the $1 million question. Well, we can go into texture and harmony and but the truth of the matter is it's got this inner spirit going on that's indescribable, that is a soundscape. It is literally a soundscape of everything you just said. Like, you feel the exhilaration of the wind in your hair. Yeah. You feel the serenity of witnessing the sun setting and walking through a wheat field for us.
It's movie music before there was movies.
Yeah, exactly. It's essentially, it's very pictorial. Like, you hear things and see pictures. Yeah. But it makes me wonder, though, and this is a good question for us to ask our city folks or people who aren't as accustomed to country living. Do they see that? Or
right.
What would they see if they're not used to walking beside? The second movement is about the brook, the bubbling brook.
The brook, and you hear the birds come in that second. That second movement is so warm. Like you say, the first movement there's this sense of joy, this sense of relaxation. But the second movement is so bloody romantic.
It really is.
It really is. Like it's heart on sleeve romance.
Yeah.
A full romanticism, abandoning the classical era entirely, and then all of a sudden he stops it and he gives you bird calls.
I know, and he actually writes in the score, cuckoo, quail, which I think is Wachtel, is the quail, and then a nightingale. And he's written that in the score. That just is further proof of how much this meant to him. That no, it has to sound like this bird. He knew these birds.
Yes.
And he
and I mean, fascinatingly, what we know about the time when he wrote it, he not only did he know those birds, but he was losing the ability to hear them. Which you know what, you have to wonder, is that why he put them in the work? Because then they were with him whenever he
and then he could come back and see the rhythms and remember because he was losing his hearing like quite drastically by this point. And let's just take a minute to really think about what that would have been like. I mean, this is just this is someone whose life was, and he was just so brilliant and he was so passionate, and he was. So when I went to Paris and I did the La Maestra, the greatest compliment that I was paid, which was meant as criticism, was I had to just not smile. My Egmont was Beethoven on Metallica.
Oh, well, I mean, Egmont kind of is, isn't it?
I kind of achieved, I worked for a year to get that thing exactly how it sounded, and it was Metallica. Yeah. To which I go, who do you think Beethoven was?
Yes. Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah. I mean, he's
more intense than me.
He was a very big revolutionary figure in music, and like we think of him now as this like revolutionary figure, but he was a revolutionary live living human in Vienna.
Yeah.
Who each and every time he released a symphony, particularly from Eroica onwards, revolutionized. Like it would have been shocking for these people, for those audiences to hear those things for the first time. It would have been alarming. In the same way that there is new music today that stops us. You know, it gives you ideas you've never had before.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so fascinating about what he achieved, even with this painfully romantic second movement, and then to jump from the romance of the brook into this peasant party. I mean, it really is. The third movement is such a romp. It's such a dance.
It's lustiges Zusammensein der Landleute, merry gathering of country folk. Yeah, it's one that goes
and having been to a merry gathering of country folk.
A year and a half ago before COVID.
Well,
don't confess to
we don't have those now.
Yeah.
But having been to I've been to a dance in a barn.
You have?
Yeah. I say that unironically, having grown up on a farm. But
okay.
I've danced in many barns. Actually, that's a strange thing to. And like those opportunities when those small towns come together for a wedding, for the fall supper, in Elrose where I went to school, we had Lob and Bob, and that was like the big party of the year, Lob and Bob, and nice. The energy of community, in joy, he captures so well in that. How does he do that?
Can I add something on to that first? This is something I was thinking about when I was in Cincinnati, coming from a small community like you've just explained, and this very specific feeling that comes from being known by people, being known by the people. I remember trying to find a church community and feeling like I was going there, but never was feeling the same feeling that I got at my home church and home community, where everybody that went to that church played on the same ball team, went to hang out at the hotel together. They were the only people in that community. They knew each other, and
one of the great advantages and disadvantages of being from a small town is everybody knows everything about you, which it can suck, but it can also like you say, when you travel to when you move to a city, you do feel that there's a bit of a void of connection.
Yes. Yeah. And so I think it's very apropos. My mark word of you to say that, because if that's what Beethoven was feeling, that's a very rich, full feeling that's unlike unlike any other. And yeah, so this movement here, Merry Gathering of Country Folk, it starts pianissimo, which is really exciting for me, that it's like for the first like 35 bars or whatever, it goes through a couple, it's just very still. And well, it's not still, it's there's actually a lot of activity, but it's like nobody wants anybody to know what.
He's not in the room yet.
He's not in the room yet. 4 measures crescendo to double forte. And that is part of what is so revolutionary about what he was doing with symphony at the time. Not only was he extending register and adding instruments,
dynamic,
and the voice, dynamic, he was expanding form. He was adding sections, repeating things. I mean, if you were an expert there with your little glasses on, studying form and everything at the premiere of these things, you would have been extremely disappointed, and it might be compared to Metallica. Yeah. So
this was his first symphony, and potentially, I'd have to check my notes, but one of the first symphonies with 5 movements.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this was, even the form itself printed in the program would have been shocking.
Yes, exactly.
To the audience.
Exactly, and these descriptive titles for someone who said he didn't even like that kind of thing. And then the next movement, of course, is the storm.
Yeah.
My mother's father, his curse word was Donnersturm. Donnersturm. He would say thunderstorm.
Thunderstorm.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Because this is a thunderstorm.
Yep.
One that is so. I'm not sure if you ever watched Fantasia when you were a kid.
Not yet.
So in it, I mean, they do this phenomenal Greek mythological retelling of this piece, and in it, of course, Thor is preparing lightning bolts for Zeus to throw at the earth. It has that sense of drama. It is actually quite like a June thunderstorm on the farm, because it can be loud and rowdy outside.
Bombastic. Yeah. It can really bring the house down. Yep. I remember being in Cincinnati and hearing a thunderstorm in February and going, what is that, though? Right. That happens in February? Not in Saskatchewan. Yeah, this exactly. I think something that's very set in F minor. Well, of course, a few different keys. But when it gets to there, and there's these tremolos. In rehearsal last night, I had my first rehearsal last night with the strings. And I said to them, is this an okay tempo? Because we want to go like the wind here, because this is kind of like the wind here. And they're like, oh yeah, we got this. And we're like, yeah, okay. So we're all really excited about this movement and what it brings. It has these sudden, like, like you can hear the lightning hitting and the storm coming and going, and then the way it eases off, which takes us into
our final movement,
which is a thanking and appreciation that the storm has safely passed. Yep. Of the Merry Gathering again, and everybody's back. And
it's funny because people in the country have a different relationship with the sky. I think prairie people in general, we have a different relationship with the sky. There's a line in one of Joni Mitchell's songs about we're all such sky oriented people. And she's talking about the fact that when the rain came down, people danced because thank God. And I feel that this spring. I mean, it's so dry in Saskatchewan. We need rain.
We have been suffering drought for a while. I just flew here from Thunder Bay, as you know, a couple days ago, where we've been getting rain on and off for the last couple of weeks. And I keep going, I wish we had that here. I wish we could have some rain out here. But yeah, this last movement, it reminds me in some ways of the first movement too, which makes sense because he's bringing back this cheerful gathering. It's all of this stuff again that you see images, you see the wind, you see the trees, you see the brooks, you see the people smiling as you hear it, and you wonder, wow, how did he do that? And how did he do it so timelessly that me here in this century can see maybe what he saw?
Right.
It's really cool.
It is phenomenal. We open this concert with one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written. In fact, it has won Classic FM, which is England's version of CBC Classical, although they still have all classical. Classic FM every year does a poll about your favorite pieces of classical music, and I think for the last something like 11 or 12 years, The Lark Ascending by Vaughan Williams has won.
Wow.
It is not only beautiful, but it's almost meditative. It's got a natural spirituality to it. It's such a simple idea, but Vaughan Williams captures so much emotion in it.
Yeah, and it was even revolutionary, this piece of him to write, because it was such a a change from how he had written before. I agree with everything that you said about the spirit of this piece. It's a 15-minute violin concerto, single movement, and we're so excited to have our very own
Veronique Mathieu with us this week. Yeah,
yes.
Veronique is of course the David Kaplan Chair of Strings at the University of Saskatchewan Music Department, and she's collaborated with us a number of times since moving to Saskatchewan. I'm so excited to have her playing this piece. I think her effortless sound is going to be just so perfect for the Lark.
And what a delightful person. I have to say, we've already met a couple times. She graciously took me grocery shopping today, and we got our Timmy's drink, and we're all like, oh my goodness, this is the first time we've hung out with anybody in like a year. Welcome to Saskatoon. The poor girl. I mean, this is her third year here, and so she's mostly known Saskatoon through a pandemic. And so grateful to be able to we're meeting with her tomorrow to go over this and discuss tempos and stuff. So really excited. Yeah, this piece, talking about film music though, like this is so film to me because like, first of all, there's all these cadenzas. So the violin just plays alone under this very still single chord for like 2 minutes, depending on your interpretation.
Intriguingly, those cadenzas are not virtuosic.
No.
It's not that they're not challenging, because to get that sound so clean and so pure, it's challenging. But unlike most cadenzas, which are an opportunity to show off, this is not about that.
It's contemplative in a way, and you can actually hear the Lark ascending, like right before the orchestra. So everybody comes in the beginning, but right after the initial cadenza, it rises up, and it's very interesting because Vaughan Williams, he actually wrote this piece, as you know, off of a poem, a 122-line poem by George Meredith. And I actually hope that you allow me, actually, before the performance, to recite the about 12 lines that he put in the score before. And this whole thing is kind of about this lark ascending and flowing and looking around. And so it's neat that he just took a peace moment in his compositional career and really because like how often do composers write something and slap a title on afterwards? Like that happens a lot, but you can really tell how he is picking up on this. I hear, honestly, Western movies. I hear like the hard life and the simple stories of hard-working women who, plowed the fields with their husband and then went and bore their 20th child behind the bush and wrapped it in their arms and kept on going. There's something just so natural.
And interestingly, I mean, he wrote it in 1914, but then it really got famous after the war in England. I mean, that was when it it was used often in performances that were in memory of lost soldiers, and of course, and Vaughan Williams served in the British Army during the not as a fighter, but so he had that connection to the difficultness, because Vaughan Williams was quite an advanced age by the time the First World War came around. Not old, but he was too old to fight. He served in other capacities for the British Army, and that was the first war where we lost composers, at least that we know of. I mean, maybe in past, but that was the first time we had identified artists who died in battle, and many of them he had been the mentor for, right? Like so it's fascinating that, like you say, it captures those hard times, the resilience therein.
Yes, that's the word. Yeah. And then other times I hear, like, for some reason, the Oriental, like Chinese folk song,
because he uses that pentatonic.
You hear that too, right?
Yep.
And then it's into that country soaring Western, kind of when the life was rough and tough and the countryside was young, or the West was whatever. Yeah, it's really a concert that I think many people will enjoy, just to come and sit. Is this open to the public, by the way? How's this going, Mark?
Well, so there's no audience.
That's what I thought.
There's no audience. It's just live stream, but it is, of course, available. Anybody can live stream it for just $20. You have access for 24 hours,
nice.
Which is really wonderful. It was funny. We were talking this week, some of the staff and I, about the fact that producing a live stream and producing a live concert are so totally different because the medium delivery is so different.
Yes.
Listening to this concert in preparation for calling the cameras, because I sit with our videographer, Simeon Taylor, and I direct the cameras at which shot we need to capture for soloists.
I see you out of the corner of my
I know,
eye.
yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of work.
I love it.
So I also memorize as much of the music as I possibly can, so that I can know who's coming in when. And listening to this, I would love to redo this concert someday with an audience in the room, because I would love to do the Vaughan Williams as it ends so tenderly with the lark drifting off into the distance, and go straight into the Beethoven without applause.
We should get a projector with a bird on it.
You can't pull that off in
No.
a live stream. It doesn't
No.
work. We have to reset the stage. That's the big one.
Yeah.
But
That's the big one.
that's the bigger challenge.
You want to do that to me?
Yeah, it's
No.
a bit tricky.
Karen?
But to be able to pull the lights down with a solo spotlight on Veronique, and then have it go out, and then the orchestra just slowly start into that
Oh,
entry.
exactly.
They do pair so well together because they're both
do.
so honest.
They are there, and they both take us on this trip to the country, which is the amazing thing about it. So tell me, who programmed this program?
We had the Beethoven planned for last spring. We were supposed to be doing it last spring as part of our Beethoven 250th celebrations.
That's gone now.
Yeah, that went. Yeah, poor Beethoven. I mean, maybe
know.
apropos that the year was silent. He was deaf. So
nice.
yeah. And the Lark Ascending has been on our wish list for a while now. And it's one of those pieces that ends up getting bumped. And sometimes that just happens, right? And not necessarily because we don't want to have it on stage. It's just that an opportunity comes up to do something else, and it's like, you know what? We can always do the Lark. The Lark is always going to be
People
there.
always come for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been a long time since we've done it. So it was actually just the amalgamation of ideas that have been sitting there for quite a long time.
It's funny how that works, right?
Yeah. Oftentimes it's just like we've had these ideas percolating for years, and now this just fits.
Well, and Veronique was saying to me today in the car when she was asked, she said she was 15, she was asked, it's an amazing thing that you programmed this Tchaikovsky piece, whatever it was. It's never programmed. No, tell us, what made you think about programming this? And Veronique, she says, I was so young, she said, but I just said, well, it was the only thing that was under 5 minutes. It's like, you never know why.
It does also magically work that this is 15 and 45.
Yeah.
And we're
the reasons
it's
people
not
program
that
things.
it's not that we picked it solely for that purpose, but it is.
Yep.
It is. We've got a couple of questions coming in from our live chat.
Ooh.
I really like this one. If Beethoven is Metallica, what's Vaughan Williams?
Oh, well, what would Vaughan Williams be? Do you have any thoughts?
Enya.
Metallica.
What was that song by Enya a few years ago? Do you remember Enya? Am I the only one who remembers Enya?
I don't know that.
So there was a song by Enya many years ago, "Only Time." That was the name of the song by Enya. It was very esoteric. It was very gentle. I think, particularly Lark Ascending. I mean, Vaughan Williams is not always quite this pastoral, but
maybe Taylor Swift. on the really gentle.
on the gentler side of things. That's
I like
good.
that. I like that. Awesome question.
Yeah, that was good. Another one that's come in. When you are performing or conducting a piece for what feels like the millionth time, how do you approach it in a new way? And how do you keep from musical burnout on a piece?
This is an exceptional question. My tongue-in-cheek response is every 4 years, perform in a different way. So when you get sick of piano, move to trumpet, and then when you get sick of both of them, become a conductor, and then make sure you change conducting really quick.
Many years ago, I had to ask almost the same question to a fairly famous artist, and he said to me, "The way I play a piece different for the millionth time is that I remember I'm being paid."
These are really, smart answers.
But that's a really good one, actually.
That's
you're being
paid,
paid, so it does have to feel fresh for everyone in the room.
Can I say something inspirational?
Yes.
Okay, I take back the other answer. It was just to be, a smart, what. I remember the audience who comes and has never heard that piece before, and I remember that it's magic that they have come to hear, and that can make me feel goosebumps each time. And I think that's important for us as musicians, especially in this day and age, to remember that we are not the masters. Our discipline did not originate with classical musicians being the masters or being the ones in charge. And I believe that we are still not, which is why after concerts, I will be the first one at the back door thanking everybody for being there and wondering how they felt. And if someone says thank you, you say you're welcome, not, oh, it sucked. How often are we tempted to... it's like you're telling that person that Santa Claus didn't exist. They think you created this thing, and then you go poke a hole in it. I think the most important thing is connection to the audience for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, moving someone.
Yeah, moving someone.
Because that's actually all we do.
That's what we do.
That's actually all musicians do is we move someone, and if we've moved more than one someone, then we've done our job.
Exactly. And a little something extra about that. One of my friends was saying, who was in the National Youth Orchestra one year when they were on tour doing Mars.
From Holst's Planet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. Da 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 da. For like the millionth time, because they play forever. Apparently the conductor, and I forget who it was, decided that he just wanted to take it fast this one time. So he looked up at them, made some kind of contact, and everybody knew something was going to happen. And then he took it so fast, and everybody was so excited, and it brought the piece to life again. So just also remember that so it was for the millionth time was the question?
Yes.
Remember that there are probably a million interpretations of the same thing. And so what an honor to get to do it that many times, to really decide how you want to do it.
Yep. Maria, I look forward to watching you make magic this weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us here tonight, and thank you for being in Saskatoon this week. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. A big thank you to the folks here at McNally Robinson Booksellers who have been incredible to host us in this very strange year of music talks. Normally, there's a live audience here for this.
Oh, cool.
This year we pivoted to the online. So huge thank you to Rachel and everyone here at McNally Robinson. Please support them all summer long. A big thanks to our crew, Simeon and Megan, who have been the people behind the cameras for Music Talk all year. You can head over to the SaskatoonSymphony.org to grab your tickets for this weekend's performance of A Trip to the Country. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's good. Yeah. See? And then eventually Simeon tells us when we're done.
I love that.